All right, Steve, thanks for hanging out with me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. Glad to be here.
So you wrote this book and you've been doing radio and you've been going around doing talks and doing all this stuff. And it's all culminated with talking to some dude in this basement that you met at church.
You betcha. Absolutely. This is the highlight of what I call the Gospel of Fitness tour. This is the highlight.
Closing it out with a bang.
You betcha. Well, I
Yeah.
knew it would be fun, though, because we know each other, and I'm super glad to be here.
That's actually what I was going to start with. Is I was going to tell people, like, this is actually the first time I'm coming up on 500 episodes of my chiropractic podcast. And this is the first time I've had somebody on that doesn't directly work with chiropractors. So they're usually either chiropractor themselves or they work within the chiropractic industry. And the reason I was doing that is a couple reasons. One, I consider you a friend.
Thank
And you've
Same
been
here.
someone who has been a blessing in my life. But also, like, you wrote this book recently that I actually think would be a really good resource for chiropractors who are dealing with patients, especially when you're dealing with like an older demographic, and sometimes you don't have time necessarily to go over like things that are best and good practices, and then you don't have something to give people, and having something that you can give them. And I actually have your book right here that
Awesome.
I bought with my own money.
Love it.
And
I would have sent you a free copy, man.
I know you would have, but Mandy told me, she said, I saw you got Steve's book. And I said, no, I bought it. Like, I didn't hit him up for a book because it's, $25. I can support my friend.
I love
So-
it. Thank you. Thank you.
And so I wanted to have you on because, like, one, I think it would be fun. And two, I think that it is a resource for chiropractors to give to their patients, and also chiropractors that they themselves maybe are.
I train a lot of chiros. I really do, and I have over the years, and it's always been a great relationship with them too, because we're doing the same thing. We're just trying to help people.
Actually, when I was reading your book, I think you mentioned. I thought you actually mentioned by name Dr. King.
Yeah.
He was my very first chiropractor.
Is that right? He's been a longtime friend, so he still comes to my gym. He's been with me for literally 30 years. Literally.
I met him in, it would have been late 90s, and I had started going to college. I started getting really bad headaches, and my mom had been going to him for a little while. And she said, she kept telling me, like, you should go to the chiropractor, you should go to the chiropractor. And I was like, I'm not going to some quack. Like, I'm not going to some fake doctor. Like, I'm not doing it. And she finally talked me into going to Dr. King. And I went into his practice, and I'm very skeptical. I'm very, like, not interested in being there. And I don't know what possessed him to do it, but he opens up the door, and this was like late 90s. And so, like, the Austin Powers thing was kind of like a popular thing back then. And he sticks his head in the door, and the first thing he says to me is, he's like, "Hello, I'm Dr. Evil."
That's him. That's him.
And I was like, "Well, good morning, Dr. Evil."
Great sense of humor, good guy, and a good chiropractor too. Very
We
good
immediately hit it off, and he's great with his hands. He's a very good chiropractor. He's someone I still refer to. And so when you mentioned him, I was just like, yeah, like, that's.
Well, the story in the book is his father. He sent his dad to me, and his dad came in, very nice guy, Charlie, and he was struggling with balance. And so we were having a conversation, and I said, Charlie, generally, when you lose your strength, you're going to lose your balance. So let's start there. Well, about, 3 months later, there was an old section in the newspaper, and it was called Ask the Doctor. And so he cuts it out, and he brings it in, and he goes, "Hey, Steve, you were right. Ask the Doctor said exactly what you said." And I'm like, well, I didn't need to ask the doctor to, verify my idea. But yeah, it does make a difference.
Dude, I'm telling you, I don't know what it is with family, especially when you give them advice. Like, they do not listen to what you say until they read it in the newspaper or they see a blog or a YouTube video. They'll literally hear someone say the thing you have said 25 times to them. And all of a sudden, this person's a freaking genius.
Yeah.
And you're like...
Yeah, I totally agree. Happens a lot. So, yeah.
So tell me so you are... Our actually relationship is interesting because our lives intersected a long time ago.
Yes.
And that was because, and I'm going way back, it's like your son was going to the same little tiny Christian church school that I was going to. And he's younger than I am, but it's, you know, it's sort of a K through 12 thing. And it's like everybody sort of interacted. And I don't know that I would have ever met you at any point back then, but our lives definitely intersected back in the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Mandy and I started going to your church because you're also a pastor. And that was really when you and I kind of reconnected and we started talking about different people we knew. And it was just like, holy cow, like we've actually, our lives have crossed many times in the past.
When you said that, that school song goes into my mind. I start seeing when you said that we met back then. I'm like, oh yeah, thank God for Central Baptist School, and you sing that whole song. We still sing that song in my car when we drive by the school. We, you know, just it's a whatever.
You know what's?
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say what's funny about that church is when you said you have that song. When I drive by that church, I always think about I helped them. I say helped. I was a kid, but when they were bricking the front of that building. I was one of the guys, I was one of the kids like carrying bricks and helping with the bags of mortar and stuff. So that's what I always think of when I drive by.
For my guys, my boys, that was the perfect fit of a school. I love those people to this day. And, you know, not every school's for everyone, but for us, it just served our purpose perfectly. So.
I went to Christian school my whole life until college, and, there's pros and cons with it. There were things I didn't like about the small environment, and I wish there were some other opportunities that came with going to a bigger school. But there were some elements. I think there were some character elements that were developed through that environment that wouldn't have been developed otherwise that I really appreciate.
100%. And you guys, your era, you guys were the basketball kings, man. You guys ran the show. You ran the small Baptist circuit show. You ran that. So I love it. I remember those things. So
we were pretty decent back in the day. And then when I went on to high school, it was sort of the same thing. I feel like it was like a dying era of decent basketball within like the small Christian schools in the area.
Well, the truth is it was because I had to coach when my boys were in school, which I never coached before. And so I think we went 0-2 years, and then we won a game. There was one point where my crew didn't score a point in the first half, and I just, at the halftime breakdown, I just looked at those guys and go, you guys hate me, don't you? You're doing this on purpose, aren't you? So it was just, but what a blast, what a fun, what great memories there. So
those are the points in your life where you have to remind yourself that God calls you to be faithful and not efficient or not successful.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. But I could, and they're great sermon illustrations. I still use them because one time I had a kid on the bench. I mean, we're playing in high school. I got a third grader, so we're not going to win. We know that. But I'm trying to get a sub in, and I look over. Where's my sub? Well, he's at the concession stand ordering a long rope licorice. So that was my only sub. So
those are the kind of kids that get on the team at the Christian school.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everybody's on the team because you don't have enough players. We had 6.
Yeah. So tell me this. I actually don't know your history in terms of, I know that it's like you're an interesting mix of person where it's like you're a pastor, you're a personal trainer, you're a jiu-jitsu instructor. Like, how did all that even come about?
Man, I just always, just loved sports. I remember when I was a kid, my grandfather we went to Kmart, and I'm sure that'll bring a smile to everybody's face who knows Kmart. And he brought me a set of weights, and they were called the All-K-Tron. And they were red plastic wrapped cement weights. And I just fell in love with lifting weights.
We had those.
Did you? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just fell in love with that. And so I trained my whole life, and then I love sports. And I'm a very introverted person. And so I would rather, that's how I expressed myself, I think, through just lifting weights, trying to get stronger, playing sports and things like that. And so, but I always loved martial arts. I would go, when I was a kid, I was a went to Taekwondo, and I went, did that 6 days a week, and just played a lot of sports. And so that's kind of where it came from, where that came from. And my background was just competitive sports the whole time. I was a competitive bodybuilder. So yeah, I just did a lot of stuff in my life.
And when did you decide to do training, like as far as opening the gym and all that?
Okay, so what happened was, and I talk about this story in the book, is my mother died at 49 years old. And the background story in that is she died in my arm on Christmas morning. And so her dying words were, serve Jesus and tell your brother to serve Jesus. And so, once again, we don't have to go down that trail, but I didn't even know what that meant at that time. But what I did then was there was a local gym that I lifted at, that I trained at, and it closed. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to turn my garage into a gym. So I did, and then I started inviting people to come to the gym, and I had like 50 paying members a month. And I had got a business license in my residence, but my neighbors were mad because I got all this traffic coming into this, the residence. But what I noticed was no one knew what they were doing. And everyone would be like, hey, could you write me up a routine? Hey, could you write me up a diet? So then I'm like, this is kind of getting out of hand. So I just said, I think the personal training thing would be good. And I remember I ordered a book out of the back of a Muscle and Fitness magazine in the classified ads for $5. And I got this thing in, and I just perused that every day. But I started learning, and then I came up with some ideas on my own, kept records of everyone who came through the door, and figured out what could people do for a lifetime, not just for a short period of time. And so that's kind of how that all came about. And I really enjoyed, like being an introverted person, I still love intelligent conversation with people. I love interacting with people. I just don't like the big crowded kind of things. But that worked perfect for my personality. And then what I did was I simply continued to refine everything that I did to make it as efficient as I could. Because, we live in this world that's very fast paced. But if I could make it efficient, I could keep people coming back and give them as good as, if not better than, a 5-day a week hour workout type of thing.
Yeah.
So that's how we approached it.
I was thinking there's a couple of things I thought of when you were saying that. One is I thought the world used to be a harder place to get information.
Yes.
Like now it's like we're spoiled. I tell chiropractors this all the time. I said there are free resources available now that are multiples of better than anything that we could have paid for back in the day. And so the lack of information is not at all an excuse anymore. It's like you have an abundance of information. And I would actually argue that, and this is probably true in I know it is true in the fitness world, is the issue you have now is too much information.
I was going to say, it's an overabundance.
Too many voices, too much complication, too much everything. And it ends up being overwhelmed, or people try something and then oftentimes they might even think that it doesn't work because the person that they learned it from was giving them an unrealistic view of what was even supposed to happen. And then it's like this, this kind of fake influencer world, and all, there's so many things, so many voices, and so many ways that people are being influenced nowadays with, whether it's business or whether it's like fitness, diet. It's pretty crazy.
It is crazy. And that's one of the reasons that I put the book together. It's a rational approach to fitness. And it's a simple approach, but it makes sense. And what I do, like when I do those, I go and do, when I'll talk to a group of people about fitness, and then I'll do a question and answer. And some of the questions are like, oh my gosh, they're crazy because you can't blame the person because the information's out there. And then, when you're thinking about influencers, and I use that term as well, they're just throwing out anything just to get another view or another like. And so, and then you have people that look really great, and sometimes that's genetics, and sometimes there's enhancement that goes along with that. And so, and then people think, oh, I want to look like that, so I'm going to train like that. That's kind of like saying, hey, I want to be tall, so I'm going to go play basketball. None of that stuff, it makes no sense. And so trying to get people to understand how your muscles actually work and how your body actually works, that's what I try to put together.
Yeah, that was actually something when I was even when I was like playing basketball a lot, and it's like I could get to where my last year before high school, I could dunk a basketball, and I worked hard at it, but I was also 6'3" as a 12-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt at all. So
it is interesting when you see these people online where I don't even know how you decipher sometimes between what's real and what's not, because there are genetic components to people's success in terms of how they look and how their body's shaped, how your body responds to certain diets. And I heard a guy years ago, I was doing a podcast before I started the chiropractic podcast. It was just a general kind of health, whatever. And this guy was he called himself a fruitarian, and he ate like only bananas, and he would eat like, I don't even know how many dozen bananas a day or something. And he acknowledged that his digestive system was basically a smoothie machine. But it's like, and I thought to myself, even if you can do that and you could run marathons and let's say all your health stuff checks out, you have to be on the outskirts of what is acceptable and normal. And if you can get away with treating your body like garbage and like, don't go telling people that's what they should do. Like that's a terrible way to go about it.
It's irresponsible. Yeah. It is. And, it's kind of like when you said that, I'm thinking, oh, the cabbage diet, the cabbage soup diet or whatever it was. And it's like, guys, that stuff doesn't work and that's why I say, looking at this, what can we do for a lifetime? How can we balance this whole thing out? And so that's, some of my ideas when it try to help people to understand what really works and what doesn't.
So before I forget, I'm going to tell my only jiu-jitsu story that I can about you.
Sure, for sure.
And that is, I went to your gym one time, and it was like I don't remember what it was, like a Saturday thing or something like that.
Yeah, we do this.
Yeah. And so you sparred with me, and I say sparred like you were not attempting to do anything and I was trying. And it was one of those things where I was like, man, I'm almost 20 years younger than you, and you were not putting any effort or energy into what was going on. I was attempting desperately to get you off of me, and I'm not a small person, and it was not working.
Well, it's really, honestly, I was trying, honestly, but for a guy my age, I'm 64, and, I generally won't spar with a guy like you. You're a big, strong guy. But you're my buddy, we're in church, and so I'm like, wait, we got to roll once.
Yeah.
But what I do is if I get on top, I just use my weight. I don't use a lot of energy. And so, but that's just years of experience. But once again, it's dangerous because you're a big, strong man. You go hard, you can throw me around, whatever. So that's my big thing, is just very defensive and then try to not use energy.
I had a couple interesting thoughts when that was going on. My one thought was, this is a lesson in working smarter, not harder. There was that. There is also a lesson in controlling my emotions.
Exactly.
Because I could actually realize, because I had told you this, because I don't know if you remember or not, but I was having a little trouble breathing at some point. And the problem was, like, I've had a lung collapse. Like my left lung's been surgically repaired. And so it's been a really long time since I've had that sort of like difficulty breathing. And it was just because I sort of lost control of my emotions and my thinking. And I was like, and I sort of just started breathing sort of out of control. And it sort of spiraled. And it was sort of like this weird, like, I don't know, it's just like this moment of time where I was like kind of going, I think I'm learning life lessons here with this whole kind of physical experience.
And so when you think about that, I always just say this, at my age, I'm 160 pounds, I'm older. And if I ever did get in a street fight, I may not win, but I would have a chance. And the only reason I would have a chance of what you just said. Most people panic. And it's, you're under someone, you don't know what to do. You feel like you got a bookshelf on you, and every breath you take, you're losing a little more air. That's the whole idea behind it. And when someone goes hard, that's when I, just try to calm myself down, listen to my own breathing, and then listen to your breathing as well. And then I kind of know, okay, now the breathing's getting shallow, it's getting fast, and I can turn it up just a bit. So
I think there's a really good lesson there in terms of just I think that can be expanded to so many aspects of life, whether it's
100%.
being a parent, whether it's being a spouse, whether it's being a business owner or whatever. Is that there's a calmness that you develop with experience and with, you've seen some things, you've been through some things, and you might not be like the greatest in the world, but like things start to slow down. I think they talk about that they talk about it. I know they talk about it with the NFL, talk about it with professional level sports, which I obviously never played, but it's like, I know that even for myself, like when I was playing the best games I ever had in basketball, everything slowed down and the basket got bigger. Like everything just sort of like, it's weird.
No,
like
you
how
see the court. Yeah.
And so it's interesting that happens, and it can happen in business, and it can happen in exercise and fitness and all kinds of different things. It's the importance of I think, learning some of those disciplines and developing the discipline to the point that you can start performing better because you're not in a panic.
Exactly. That's 100% true. It's like you said, it's everyday life, So, yeah.
So tell me this about, one of the things I like about your book is that it actually reminds me a lot of the coaching style that I have with chiropractors, where I often will tell them that the things I teach are not complicated. And a lot of times people disregard them because they're not complicated. And I think that the foundational things of most aspects of life and things you want to be good at, they're easy to understand, and it requires a level of discipline to do them. But if you are disciplined, you are doing them well, that becomes like the foundation in which you can be successful. And as I was reading your stuff, I was kind of going, and I think you probably even said it in there, that like, this is not difficult to understand. It's just difficult to be consistent with.
Correct. Yeah. And what I try to do is make it memorable as well. And just so you know, when I'm writing this book, the background, just a little more background on it. I have trained a lot of people over the years. And in this particular situation, I have a guy that I trained 8-10 years ago. We were at a pastor's conference in Florida. We went to a 24-hour fitness. I took him through a workout. It's my 15-minute workout. It's not, I use 15 minutes, but that's just kind of my, just my framework. I'll put it like that way to you that way. But he's like, man, that was the best workout I've ever done. Well, over the years, he had me on his podcast, and he would always ask me questions. His name was Pete. And I said, and I always I have a pretty good, a small following in a private Facebook group. I call it the Gospel Fitness Inner Circle. And I'm always giving my clients information. And so I was just writing things to give to my clients. Well, I told him, I said, hey man, I've written I got this thing kind of like a book. It's about probably 90% done. I said, I answer all the questions that you have in this book. And he goes, well, that's really interesting because I have a publishing company. And that's where it came about. But with that said, as I was going through it again, I'm like, I don't know how to write a book. I know how to write a sermon. So that book is a series of my sermon thoughts. And if you think about it, it's kind of how it works. Is I have people that have bought it from church, and they'll say, you know what? I hear your voice in my head when when I'm doing the book. So yeah, and I just tried to simplify the whole thing. And I put, I'll go I've been in front of over 1,000 people with an open mic to answer fitness questions, and I can answer them because of the framework that I put together. The 3W Pursuit of Fitness, the framework is there, and I can answer any question based on that framework and some of the principles that I put forward with that.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Like the 3Ws, kind of what is that framework? Like what is your philosophy because this isn't generically about fitness so much as this is about fitness now and like into the future, because like the full name of the book is The Gospel of Fitness, A Rational Approach to Aging Gracefully. So this isn't about being a power lifter. You talked about, being a power lifter. This isn't about like being a pro athlete. This is about staying active, staying mobile, getting, longevity. You'd mentioned the person, the Dr. King's dad who has lost his balance. And those are issues that are flexibility and balance. And strength. And those are things that are massive problems as people get older, and it just ruins and wrecks the end of your life.
It really does.
So talk about the 3 W's.
Sure.
And
So
your philosophy.
the first one is weight training. And Jerry, here's the thing. I train UFC fighters. I still train jiu-jitsu athletes who are highly competitive. My son's got a tournament this weekend in Indianapolis. I train him regularly. I use those same principles, and I'll explain why. Because what I'm training every single client that walks through my door for, I'm training them for one reason. I want them to get stronger. That is the number one reason. Now, from that strength, you have skill work, correct? Like I tell my jiu-jitsu guys, like, doing battle ropes, hanging from your gi from a chinning bar to build your grips. You don't need to do all that stuff. Here's what you need to do. You need to get stronger, and then you need to train your sport. Now, with that said, I still, this morning, trained my 87-year-old, or 89-year-old, I think she is, aunt. Same principle. However, she cannot do the intensity nor the volume. So let me explain how I approach it. There are 4 different muscle fiber types. There's slow oxidative, fast oxidative, fast oxidative glycolytic, and fast glycolytic. So those muscles deplete, or they are stimulated in a sequential order, provided that they don't get rest, meaning that I keep you under the load for a certain period of time. Time under load is the idea. And so what I do with that is I kind of, the 60 to 90 second point, and you can go 50 to 60 to, right in that area is where the muscles is going to happen. So let me explain it this way. So you start your set. The first muscle fiber type depletes relatively quickly. Now your body, your brain will signal to those muscle fiber types to fire based on the tension, based on the load. And I want the load to be moderate, and I'll explain that in a second. So then the second muscle fiber type fatigues, as long as we don't allow it to recover. The third one then is called into action, and it fatigues, as long as we don't allow it to recover. If we allow it to recover, those 3 replenish really, really quickly. But what we're after is that 4th muscle bundle, that fast glycolytic muscle bundle. That takes anywhere from 2 to 20 seconds to be stimulated, provided all the other 3 are fatigued. Now, and that is momentary muscular failure. That's what we're after. And we do our reps slow and controlled the whole time, making sure we're in that zone that keeps tension on the muscle. Now, once that 4th muscle fiber type fatigues, it takes anywhere from 4 to 10 days to recover based on the individual recovery response from that person. That's why I only tell people to train 2 days per week. And the way that I do it, we use meaningful loads, but they're not super heavy. There's a point where the weight gets so heavy, I call it the point of diminishing returns, it begins to load your joint rather than the muscle. One of the things I talk about in the book is I train muscles and save joints, because that's what happens as you get older. I was on his podcast, and he does, some of the typical stuff that goes on. He's 50 years old. At the end of the podcast, he goes, you know what? He said, what you said is 100% true, because my joints are starting to break down. I'm going to take your advice and try this idea. And I said, yeah, your joints aren't going to recover. They're not going to get better. So part of anti-aging is keeping your joints healthy. And so in the program and how I set up the workouts is, and I didn't explain in this much detail in the book, only because it could get super technical and I wanted the average person to kind of understand it. So I did more sets and reps with that. But what I do is I go from one exercise to the next exercise with as little rest as possible. So that during that period of time that you're in the gym, I can keep your heart rate elevated. And I'm training your muscular failure, breathing really, you start breathing harder and you start feeling it, and really, really does challenge you. And what I do is I go from a pushing muscle group to a pulling muscle group so that your muscles have time to recover, and I kind of go back and forth from there. So that's how I approach the weight training part of it. Now, the walking part, I suggest 30 minutes of walking per day. And the reason that most clients, and I'm sure your chiropractic crowd will kind of understand this, you deal with a lot of people that are overweight. You know, it's just part of our society. So most clients come to me and they want to lose weight. So, and we can talk a little bit more about this in the watching your diet part, but you have to create a calorie deficit. There's just no way around it. That's just a fact. People can dance around it any way they want, but we have to create a calorie deficit. We don't want to do that with exercise, especially as people age, because excessive exercise, once again, breaks down the joints. So we want to do what I call low-impact aerobic activity, which is walking or bike riding, but I don't do it hard. It's very moderate. There was a study done, and the guy he measured BMR after 3 hours of this activity. The first activity was walking. The second activity was eating and walking. And the third activity was walking and eating. The second activity, eating and walking, increased BMR 25 to 30%.
And you're talking about eating then walking.
Eating then walking. Within 15 minutes, you're going to walk for 30 minutes. You're not walking fast. You're just walking at a moderate pace. And what you'll notice when you do that, what I always tell people is you'll start belching because it helps and aids in digestion. The other part of the walking thing is if you can walk outside, because you get to see this beautiful world that we have and we miss it so often. We're so busy trying to get through things that we miss this, just this opportunity to look at the stars or look at the sky or see the sunshine or whatever. Yeah. So that's why, and I don't make that a law. You don't have to do it every day after dinner. Some people can't. But 30 minutes a day is plenty. And then the third thing is watching your diet. And that is what we're trying to do is eat the most nutritious foods in the best way that we can. No one's perfect with that. For me, I'm dealing with a condition called silent GERD. So my diet has to be perfect or I have flare-ups. So, but for the most part, we're just, I just suggest to my clients, look, you have to count calories because if you can measure it, then we can adjust. Because, and you'll know this, and your listeners will know this as well. When you talk to people, well, I was talking to a guy the other day, he weighed 284. He goes, but we don't eat that much. I'm like, bro, come on. You're not eating kibbles and bits at 284. You can talk about veggies all day long, but trust me, you're throwing down something.
My brother's a very large human being, and he needed to lose. They told him he had to lose over 100 pounds before they would even do knee surgery.
Yeah.
And he would always tell me that same thing. He's like, I don't really eat that bad. I'm like, I know you're genetically larger than I am. Like, I get that, but you aren't twice as big as me genetically. You know what I mean? Like, it's, and he did some intermittent fasting and just watched his intake. And he dropped 130 pounds.
That's
in
awesome.
It was like
that.
6 or 7 months. It was quick.
Intermittent fasting is huge. And you know what I tell my clients too? Start measuring. Start keeping track. Because you're walking by and grabbing a handful of peanuts. That's 180 calories per, so you're looking at these things, you're not thinking about them. It's mindless eating. And so you put yourself on a schedule. So, but here's one thing that I will say that I think is super helpful with diet is begin to enjoy vegetables if you can, because they are highly nutritious, they're very low calorie, and they are very filling for your body. And they also help with that intestinal flora. It helps break down foods. And so that's a really important factor as well.
I remember years ago reading that one of the things that someone could do that raises your likelihood of success in terms of reaching weight loss goals and things of that nature, one of the simple things you could do is journal. And it's that awareness. It's just the fact that if you go from not being aware to being aware, you're going to eat less and you're going to eat better because you're forcing it into your line of sight, and you have to now be you have to be intellectually dishonest,
exactly.
Like where you're
That's it.
Like, and I think there's something internal within human beings that we generally don't try to do that. And so it's like you either have to be intellectually dishonest or you're going to make a change. And people tend to make a change, and it's just something simple as writing it down or documenting it makes a difference.
Yeah, and we are so good at lying to ourselves about how much food we eat.
Yeah.
And I'll have clients that come in and they'll ask me this question. Well, what about having a glass of wine? And here's always my answer. And I'll say, listen, we're really good at lying about how much we eat. We're better at lying about how much we drink. I don't drink, but you know what I'm saying? And I'll say this, and I'll say, okay, do you drink one glass of wine or do you drink a bottle, which always ends the conversation? Because people lie to themselves. We don't want to face that reality. And once you become honest about it, then it becomes something that you can control.
My brother would tell me that. He was a police officer for 10 years, and he's like, if they say they've had one drink, they've had three. If they say they have two or three, they've had 6 or 7.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of how I put the framework together. And once again, it just makes it so simple. And I always tell my clients also, if once a week, if you want to do something extra, we have Monk's Mound around here. If you want to challenge yourself and walk Monk's Mound, man, that's awesome. For me, Saturday, like you said, is my jiu-jitsu day. I only train, I lift weights once or twice a week. Now I'm pretty much once a week, believe it or not. My last workout was 12 minutes and 12 seconds. I know that sounds insane, but it was a super intense workout. And it felt really good. It was just yesterday, and I'm sore from it today. So I'll do one workout a week, and then I'll do a drilling session with jiu-jitsu, and then I'll do one hard session a week as well. And then I walk nearly every day.
So talk to me real quick about the muscle tension. So you're saying like keep the muscles under tension. Is that restricting like full lockout, like when you're doing particular motions? Like kind of run me through the specifics there.
So if you think of it in terms, think of it in terms of a push-up. And so when somebody will ask you, well, how many push-ups can you do? I did 27 push-ups or whatever. I don't look at the push-up in that way. I look at the push-up as a way to stimulate my chest, my shoulders, and my tricep muscles. So what I do is I'll have my client start in a top of a push-up position, and I have them lower it as slowly as I can. And what'll happen is they'll always drop their hips because you want it to be, you can decline more than you can incline. So they'll drop their hips so they can actually, and I'll always have to instruct, keep your hips up 1 inch higher, and then slowly go down. Do not touch the floor. Do not go about 1 inch from the floor where you still feel tension in the muscle. Pause briefly, and then when you go from down to up, I call that a turnaround. Make your turnaround very smooth. Come up as slow as you went down. Come up to about 3 inches from the top. You'll still feel that muscular tension. There's no respite. There's no rest there. And then go back down. And then what I do is I simply time my push-up. So I can get to 40, 50 seconds. I may get 3 reps.
Yeah.
But the goal is not mechanically moving a weight or mechanically moving your body. The goal of exercise, in my opinion, in my system, is to deeply stimulate, they call it inroading, to deeply stimulate or inroad that musculature so that once it's broken down, it then can recover. If, like I said earlier, if you stimulate that fast glycolytic part of your musculature, and you go back the next day and try to work out, that part of your muscles they're not available. They're not recovered. Yeah. Most people, what they do when it comes to going to the gym is they'll go and lift one day. They recover enough to go back to the gym and lift the next day. Some people do it because mentally they love being in the gym. I totally understand that. But the goal is for us to get stronger or not lose our strength as we age. And to do that properly, you have to recover, because I believe that recovery is one of the most misunderstood parts of a fitness program, of almost any kind of a program, because most people overtrain because they see everyone else doing it, so I have to do it to keep up.
So if a person they're adding strength by doing this, if someone wants to add mass, whether that's aesthetics or whatever, is the same philosophy applied to
Absolutely.
mass? You just bump up the weights?
Well, it's not just necessarily bumping up the weights. It's going to be keeping your protein levels very, very high and adding some extra calories.
Yeah.
The other thing about that too is you may even look at body part specialization from there. I have a lot of guys. Just think about this. I don't know if you'd know these names. There's a guy named Dorian Yates who was a Yep. So that principles were the same. Now, Mike Mentzer. Do you remember Mike Mentzer? He was a guy before Dorian Yates that used a high intensity. He called this heavy duty. What they did was they used these principles, but what they did was they used weight to increase their intensity. For me to increase intensity, I can keep my weights moderate, but there's a huge part of the mind-muscle connection that helps stimulate muscle. And when you look at, when you're looking at Olympians, they're outliers, Mr. Olympia guys. They have a lot of muscle injuries and, things like that. But yes, you can gain muscular body weight. I have guys in the gym now who've gained muscular body weight from doing this particular program. You just, once again, have to be consistent. And then when I'm looking at gaining weight, we have to then begin to measure how does this person's recovery ability work. There are some people who recover faster. They might even be able to fit in 3 workouts a week, but that's not the norm. Generally, 2 seems to work the best.
That was actually something, Mandy, my wife, for people that don't know who that is, she went to SIUE and did like a body analysis thing where they're like, how fast is she, body fat percentage and how fast is she processing lactic acid, stuff like that. And she's the reason that she can run, or at least she was before the kids, she could run and ride a bike is because she processes lactic acid faster than most people do.
She was an outlier. She was very strong, very muscular when I trained her, and just really, but she was also, I think we helped her in the sense of cutting back a little bit just on the training.
Yeah. She actually had to cut, not to get into the personal thing, but she had to cut back to have the baby because it was, although she liked the feeling of running and liked the feeling of kind of got that runner's high, and she really loved that. It was wreaking havoc on her body in terms of how her body actually functions. Yeah.
Cortisol levels are through the roof. My wife's the same way though. She can go, and it's like there's a point where once again you're looking at the point of diminishing returns on a different level. So
yeah, absolutely crazy. So tell me this: what are some things that you have personally done in the past that you look back at from a diet or fitness standpoint and kind of go, "Yeah, that didn't work," or maybe that was not a good idea?
Too extreme. I've done some extreme stuff. I do a lot of experimentation. Yeah. So 2 extremes. Tried carnivore before. That's hard. It's after a while, even steaks get old. You know what I'm saying? It's like so that that's one.
Was it the balance, or was it the extra fat, or what is just what was it that bothered you about that?
It was it messed with my digestive system. I think that's the thing that I noticed mostly. That level of protein and fat really seemed to bother my stomach a bit more. I'll just, without getting too graphic about it, sometimes if you light a match in a room, you could blow the room up, if you know what I'm saying. So you got to listen to your body, man. If it says but some people love that and they do it. I have a lot of people who do it, and I'm like, if that works for you, great. So that's one thing. But I've also tried all kinds of different workout. I've tried all the workout plans, powerlifting, those kind of things. So I have a tendency to get extreme in everything. It's just how I'm wired. So I've been to that nth level of things. And so I think now, looking back, the biggest mistakes were just the extreme things. And now I look at it and go, having a moderate approach. Aging gracefully is treating your body gracefully. And so resting more is super important.
That's something that a lot of chiropractors have to deal with because our job's very physical.
Oh man,
so,
yes.
There's issues that chiropractors will have because there's techniques and stuff that you will use as a younger chiropractor that as 10, 15 years go by, you have to just be honest with yourself and be like, man, I have got to do this differently because my shoulder's hurting, my back's hurting, my knees are hurting. And, my chiropractor has recently sort of transitioned from the technique he's historically done just because of his body. I know that I would have had to have done that still being in practice just because I'm so tall, like constantly leaning over patients, either getting a taller table or doing something different because it's really hard on the body as a chiropractor.
No question. And that's why it is so vitally important to train your muscles and save your joints, because that's a demanding occupation. That is, you're looking at twisting people, pushing, pulling, and you get big people in there. It's really, really difficult for you guys to deal with. So yeah, I totally, you have to adjust as you have to adjust to your aging process, so to speak.
Do you have any recommendations for flexibility, like maintaining flexibility with time?
Yeah, for me, speaking of the weightlifting, so when it comes to flexibility, I train people throughout a full range of motion based on keeping the muscles tense during the whole time, and you can connect your mind to the muscle to do that. That's the only flexibility that I recommend. Now, before everybody gets mad about that, let me just say this. If, in the case of an injury, something that you have to recover from, there may be some extra things that you need to do. But generally, I don't suggest a lot of flexibility exercises for my clients, because what I find is, I give you a classic example. I have a really cool doctor that I train online. I train a lot of clients online, and she's in Maryland. And she's very strong, one of those people that recover very, very well. And so I take her through a workout, and she's just doing great. Well, she reads, are you familiar with Dr. Peter Attia? He wrote the book Outlive, anti-aging guy. I was reading that book, and I was actually listening to the book in audio as I was walking in Florida. I remember exactly where I was at, and I'm listening to his workout regime, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you are a chronic overtrainer. And in the next chapter, he talked about the surgeries that he had. But anyway, back from overtraining. But back to this doctor. So she said, I trained her. Next time I see her, she goes, you know what? I should have just listened to you. I was listening to Dr. Attia, and he said to do this stretch, and I hurt my shoulder really bad. She actually partially tore her rotator cuff. So extreme flexibility, it's not important at all. If you train your body, I mean, the recovery from injury is having strength throughout a full range of motion based on how the function of that joint works. And so that's all I'm after. So I want to keep people strong in those particular ranges of motion. I'll give you an example. When I'm doing a leg extension, you'll hear a lot of people say you shouldn't lock out at the top. I don't think that's necessarily true. It's just how you apply the load and the force and how much weight you're using. But I will train that through a full range of motion, all the way up, slow turnaround, all the way down. You don't need any more range of motion than that. Any more than that it could cause your joints to be compromised. And I have a jiu-jitsu guy who was pretty extreme into flexibility, hurt his back because he was overstretching, and it caused his low back to be compromised and caused him a back injury. So I don't do a lot of those things. If people want to do yoga or they want to do things, feel free to do so. Just don't do it so often that it does it, that you lose strength with it or whatever. So that's kind of how I approach it.
So the focus is functionality within a normal range of motion.
Bingo. Exactly. That's a better way to put it. Yeah. A normal range of motion, which is just what we want.
All right. So I told you I was going to do this. I got a few words here. So I'm going to just throw something out here. Some of these are supplements.
I hope I don't get offensive here, but I'll tell you what comes to my mind.
No, just so you let me know whatever comes to mind. These don't have to be long conversations, sure. And it might just be something simple. But first thing is creatine.
Good. Very good. Very well tested, low-hanging fruit, helps with cognitive decline, helps with recovery. I like it. I'm a fan.
Branched chain amino acids.
I think they're helpful. I don't take them, but I do think they're helpful because you can't get them through a normal diet. And so I do think they're helpful for some people.
Pre-workouts.
Crazy. I don't do them. And I'll tell you why. Let me tell you why. The reason why is because what pre-workouts do, they make you work harder than you normally would.
So burning out.
Exactly, which will compromise your recovery time. It will, and the other part of that too is they have some man. I had one of my buddies come into the gym, and he was actually a trainer of mine. I love him. He's a crazy man, but he's got a thing of C4, and his name's Mike. I go, Mike, how many C4? And he's bouncing off the walls when he comes in. I'm not kidding. I'm like, Mike, how many C4s did you have today? And he goes, you mean today? And I go, yeah, today. And he goes, I said 3 or 4. And I'm like, you're supposed to only have 1 at 2 at the most. Yeah. I mean, dude, you look like you're on drugs right now. And so blood pressure through the roof. So you just have to be careful of those things. I don't use them. A cup of coffee is fine for a pre-workout.
I had a guy, there was guys at the gym I used to go to, and everybody was like super into like the pre-workouts. They'd bring them there. You know what I mean? Like they're scooping them out and doing it right there. Like, I don't know why you're bringing them at the gym. Like, I don't know if that's
got to show off. Then you got the beta alanine and your skin's crawling, and
they're all like bright blue,
exactly,
or bright green.
Exactly.
Looks like some sort of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle ooze or something.
Yep.
Like, yeah, and they're just super excited about their pre-workouts. I've never been a pre-workout guy, but it's like I see people do them. So I have a really interesting thing about me is I have a really high tolerance for caffeine.
So you can drink a cup of coffee and go to sleep.
Oh yeah,
wow,
no problem. I could drink more than a cup of coffee and go to sleep. Like,
I'll tell you what has crushed my soul with this GERD. I had to stop drinking coffee.
Oh,
dude, I was thinking about it today. I'm like, aging is grieving, and this is part of the aging process. I'm hoping I can get this thing fixed. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. I'll go right back to coffee if I can.
Yeah, I've only had one time in my life ever that I got jittery from caffeine.
Really?
And the amount of caffeine I had that day is shockingly, it would probably kill a normal human being.
I love that.
It was a massive amount. And I was kind of like, and it was like, I remember it because it never happens. And I was kind of like,
what's this?
Huh. Maybe I should have, maybe I shouldn't have had like the whole pot of coffee and like 6 energy drinks and a couple Mountain Dews. That might have been a little much.
Yeah.
So, all right. Next one, testosterone boosters. Low T. Everybody's talking about low T.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily know if they work. Okay, but let's talk about that, because this to me is it's going to become a problem, and here's why. There's so much money to be made in these things.
Yeah.
And so we did a little experiment. One of our buddies is 36, 37. So he goes to a clinic and they say, your T levels are low, you need to be on TRT. And so then we sent his 26-year-old nephew there, and they said the same thing. And so I think it's very dangerous if you are not responsible in what you are doing. So testosterone replacements, the drugs, they definitely work. I just think they're very overprescribed. Just think you have to be careful of that.
I would be very, very, very concerned the younger a man was that went down this path. I would be very concerned. I don't know a ton about the topic. I do think that there's value there. I don't think it should be a throw the baby out with the bathwater situation.
I agree.
But if somebody was in like their 20s and 30s talking about it, I'd be like,
I see it all the time. I'm
not a fan.
And Jerry, here's what happens. Once again, sometimes it happens to athletes because they're overtraining.
I've heard that.
And just that lowers your testosterone level. Another thing is what I said earlier, recovery. That's the overtraining thing. But a lack of sleep. Sleep is the most anabolic thing you could do after training. It's where your growth happens. It's where the magic happens. So my suggestion is make sure you're eating enough good food, and that includes like a fatty steak, so that you have some saturated fat that helps with that. That helps with cholesterol, actually. You don't want to overdo that, but it does make a difference. And then zinc. Supplement with zinc. Zinc really does help with your testosterone levels.
I hear these commercials that are like, at the age of 35, your testosterone starts, whatever. I come from a long line of high testosterone men. I always listen to those commercials and I'm like, I could use a little less testosterone. I mean,
Yeah.
my testosterone's caused me nothing but trouble my whole life.
Well, my levels, I get, and I'm going to the doctor next week. I'll get them checked again. But even at my age, they're still over 900.
I don't know what mine are, but I was bald at 16. I
Yeah,
grew a beard at 12. Like, I don't have, I could use less.
I get it. I get it.
All right, next one, ice baths.
Cult. It's a cult, man. It's a cult. So, and I'm being somewhat facetious. I'll give you a story. So we had a guy, are you familiar with Wim Hof, the breathing guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had a guy in that's a student of Wim Hof, and it was in a jiu-jitsu thing, and they used the breathing thing. And so you go through, and it's pretty cool. But I'm thinking to myself, he's telling these stories, and I'm thinking, man, this is cultish. You know, I went to the top of whatever mountain, and we took our clothes off, and we got into a cold river, and I'm like going, dude, I ain't doing that, you know? So, but I think for some people it helps. I ain't getting in an ice bath. It ain't happening. The older you get, the colder you get. So I go through this thing. At the end, they're putting people in ice baths using this breathing technique, and they're going, are you going to get it? I'm like, I ain't getting into that. I use hot showers because it feels better. So that helps. And I think we miss that. You know, just a good hot shower will help with recovery as well. They'll go saunas to ice baths. So, and I say cult because it's just like, oh man, this is so big on the internet at this point. Yeah. But I just don't know. You know, I don't really know that, I don't know if that, you know, what the thing is. There's got to be something to it because so many people are doing it and they love it.
I know that it stemmed from a particular research that was done that when they went back and checked it, it was not done very well. So the evidence that it makes a difference worth the discomfort is, I haven't seen any. I've seen that it's like, it's sort of like, you know, if it makes a 1%, if it's a drop of the ocean difference, is it worth being uncomfortable about?
For me.
My son was talking about it because he's 16 and
they can jump in ice baths, no problem.
He cares about his muscles now and what girls think. And, you know, he's kind of he's starting that phase of his life. And he was talking to me about like taking cold showers. I'm like, bro, I'm 45. I'm married. I ain't taking cold showers.
Ain't happening. Ain't happening. I'm with you, man. Totally with you.
All right. Next one, fitness tech and apps.
I think, you know, I write about this in the book. I think that they are not as, they're not as accurate as they claim to be. I guess I'll put it to you that way. I do think that if you like that feedback, you can use that. But I think like when it comes to tracking calories and things like that, I had a guy come into the gym and he was like, hey, I'm not losing weight. And I said, well, you're eating too much food. And he points to his fitness app and he says, but my Fitbit says that I can eat this many calories. And I said, bro, your Fitbit is wrong because the scale's going to tell you the truth. I mean, it was very offensive to him, but it made sense to him when I mentioned, I go, you know, individually, you have to track yourself. You know, for me, I write things down, and that works best for me, but I try not to track too many things.
I think it can be overwhelming, like too much information.
Exactly. That's
how much of that information. I struggle. I have this issue with chiropractors when I'm teaching them about their business or about marketing and other stuff. And sometimes it's like, I'll get these clients and they're going into the weeds with like their website and their search engine optimization and everything else. And I'm going,
too much,
man, you are really making mountains out of molehills here. Like I know that information is available, but just because it's available doesn't make it useful.
Correct. I agree. That's kind of how I look at those. I don't use them personally. Well, I take that back. I do measure oxygen and my pulse rate, which is always ridiculously low, like 38. And so with the last time I went to the doctor, this literally happened. I was going to tell the nurse, hey, my pulse rate's, my heart rate's really, really low, and I didn't get it out. And she ran out of the room, ran and got the doctor, and he came in. He knew me. He came in laughing. He goes, hey, we're going to have to call an ambulance for you. I'm like, bro, we're in the hospital right now. Why would you call an ambulance? He goes, well, your pulse rate. So, but yeah, that's kind of the one that I use,
I had a guy that reminded me of, it's the opposite side of that spectrum, but I had a guy that was a patient of mine when I was a student doctor at Logan, and he was grossly overweight. did not take care of himself. And the only reason he was my patient is because nobody else could adjust him because he was so big. And I'm tall enough and long enough that I could get the leverage necessary to adjust him. So he was my patient. But his blood pressure was through the roof, even medicated. It was just always ridiculous. And so he, one of the days that he came in, there was there's like younger students that were helping, and they would take vitals. And I always was wondering, I always used him to tell if they were lying or not, if they were actually checking. Because if they told me like, oh yeah, 120 over 80 or anything even in the ballpark of normal, I'm like, you did not check it. And so if they didn't get this look, it's this look. It's like, and they're like, and they start to get a panicked look on their face.
This guy's going to die in a minute.
You're actually trying to find it because it's higher than you think. And yes, it is alarming.
Yes.
And it was always funny to see, like, because I could always tell whether they were lying, whether they were trying, and he knew, like, I mean, that's like when I had a patient. I remember as a student, I had a patient that was a smoker, and she told me, she said, because they would get new students, the people that came into these clinics, they would get new students every semester, and she's like, you're the first one that's didn't bug me about smoking. And I said, smoking's bad for you, right? And she's like, yes. I was like, you should stop, right? She's like, yes. And I'm like,
that's all? There's nothing more to say?
Like, if me telling you that, is that going to make a lick of difference after 17 other people have told you that?
I totally agree with that, man. It's my church philosophy, too. Yeah, hey, that's not good for you, don't do it. You know it already. I don't have to tell you.
Right. The Bible says stuff about that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Two more. One is just for fun, P90X.
Oh, dangerous.
And then last one, which is actually a little more serious, feelings about these body type, genetic type, blood typing for diet, exercise. So people will say, the reason you're not losing weight is because you don't know your type.
Blood. Yeah, I've read the book. It's the blood type. I read that book years ago.
Yeah.
And once again, here's the way I look at that. It comes down to measuring. And so if you're not losing weight, now there's other factors that figure in, but generally you're eating too much food. Generally. And so maybe you're eating the wrong foods or whatever the case is. You can adjust those if you measure them. Does blood typing make any difference? I'm not 100% sure with that. It's kind of out of my ballpark. I don't have a way for people to come in and test their blood type. But I do think that, hey, my thing is this. If it works for you and you have a diet that's based on your blood type and that works for you, go for it. I think that's wonderful. And, but here's what we want, Jerry. What we want is we want one diet to fix everything.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work like that because your body's very adaptable. It's going to lower its BMR to hold on to body fat. It's, it's just going to it wants to stay in homeostasis. And what we have to do is slightly disrupt that without destroying that homeostasis. And so, but once again, if it works for people, I'm good with it.
My philosophy, and I think this is probably your philosophy too, regarding like when I'm teaching people about business or whether it's in your case, we're talking about, fitness. To me, it's like, get the foundation right, get the basics right. It's like if you don't come to me asking me for some like pie in the sky specific bizarre thing that you think may or may not be the secret when you're not doing the foundational things correctly. You're not doing the basic stuff right.
Once again, you're right. And when you get that foundation, when you get that basic, then you can start branching off into something more. So
I think people, so many people are looking for a secret. They're looking for a home run.
Yeah.
They're looking for an exception. They're looking for and they just completely look past what works for most people most of the time because it's not sexy. It doesn't get YouTube clicks and whatever because and that's one of the things as I was reading your book, as I was thinking to myself, this is such a good foundation. And whether that's like, this is it, this is what I'm going to follow, this is what I'm going to do, or it's like there's a dietary tweak, there's an exercise tweak, there's a change here, but it's like, this is such a good solid foundation. And it really did, it's sort of like, I felt like we were kindred spirits, because I'm like, when I teach stuff to people from a business standpoint, I feel like it's a similar like philosophical framework where it's like, get the foundation right, get the not sexy, boring stuff that's habits, just that stuff, get it right, and then worry about the other stuff.
Totally agree that it really does make a difference. So yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for that compliment. I love it.
Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Actually, I was going to ask you this, and this is sort of like, kind of like anything else you want to talk about. You've been doing the presentations, the podcasts, the radios, whatever. Is there anything that people have not asked you about that they should have?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I get so many random questions. No, actually, I think, I think a lot of times, people, it's what you just said. They'll go, like, I'll have people come in and it's like, I was doing a book signing, and man, you go through a lot of people and you're hearing everybody's issues, and will this help my arthritic wrist? And I'm like, no, it won't. You know what I'm saying? It won't. And so, but as far as, just basic things, I don't think so. I think that people kind of, I really do think that the book does make things simple, because what I'll hear from people, and when I explain it to them in person, I always see them shaking your head like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I think it explains things pretty well, but I don't think there's any, any questions that I haven't heard or they should have asked. I think I've heard there's some things you'd be like, well, that's a little different thought, but so.
I was tempted to do this or not do this, but I am going to do it. And I didn't tell you I was going to do it. You and I are both Christians, and you use the word, the gospel of fitness. And I know that the gospel, the actual gospel is the most important thing for both of us in terms of all that. I know that in life, like, we get so bogged down with our physical bodies or making money or whatever that happens to be. But I never talk about my faith on the podcast. And I think that there's a hole in every human being that is a God-shaped hole where they're searching for purpose, searching for meaning. And I know that you and I both have kind of found purpose and meaning in our relationship with God and the gospel. And I didn't know if I just wanted to give you just a minute to talk about that.
Let me please briefly do that. So listen, here's the thing. The thing about it is, and I think that now we look at, the Christian faith, and I train a lot of clients. I train a Jewish rabbi. I train all kinds of different people. And the feedback I get is we're now a political movement rather than a real thing. Christianity. It's so weird. I'm fighting against this thing that's like, no, this is not what this is about. So I just want to explain to people what it is. Each and every one of us, there's a standard of goodness that God sets, and the standard is perfect. And we can never reach that standard. We'll have these things that go on in our lives. We think we're good people, but the truth is we're not. Yeah. All of us have messed up in one way or another, and we will do everything we can to hide from that rather than to face that. It's simply called sin. That's all it's called. And because we all fall short of that perfect standard. So the idea then is that God sends Jesus to create this perfection, to live this perfect life for each and every one of us. And we live our lives in this particular way. Jesus comes along and he makes this offer. And he says, in me you will have peace. And the demand or the command of the gospel is this. It's to trust in Jesus alone, not to trust in your good works in any way, shape, or form. Christianity is this: Jesus, I trust you. That's all it is. It's not being a good person. It's not being moral. I don't have to worry about what people think about me. I don't, because in my failure, Christ is strong. In my weakness, Christ is strong. In my messed upness, he fixes that. So now let me tell you what happens though. Once you accept that gift that you're given, things change in your life. Here's my story. My mother died in my arms on Christmas morning, 1988. Her last words were, serve Jesus and tell your brother to serve Jesus. I had no idea what that meant. I tried going back to church, and I'm like, this is the same old nonsense. One day I got on my knees, and I said, you know, Jesus, I've heard a lot about you, but I don't even know if you're real. If you're real, will you show me? That was my prayer. Yeah. And nothing magical happened. But here's what I noticed. I remember exactly where I was. I was driving to work, was working midnight at the time, and it was about 2 weeks later, and I realized that something in my heart had changed. And it was super weird, but the things that I used to enjoy doing, I stopped enjoying. They became different to me. And that was my moment of conversion. That was my moment of becoming a Christian. And so, but now, gosh, I have joy, I have peace, and I have a purpose in my life. And but man, there's no greater way to live.
There's a lot of people that I talk to, like friends of mine, clients, whatever, and they are not Christians, and they'll say that, you know, all religion is the same. And I always tell them that the thing that's fundamentally different about Christianity, and there's this confusion about, even amongst Christians, there's confusion about what it actually is,
yes.
is that all religion is human beings trying to be appealing to God and appeal to, like, to get favor with God. And that's not the Christian message. And it's the only religion that says, where God says, you're not good enough, and I'm going to love you anyway, and I'm going to create a way for you to have relationship with me in spite of you. And then after you're in the family of God, there is a living a certain way and being born again and kind of being changed that does happen. But that isn't what gets you right with God. And it is completely different than all other religions, where the point of all religions is, I'm going to do this, or act this way, or behave this way, or do these things, and then I'm going to be right with God. And that's not what the Christian faith is about. And that's not what the gospel is.
You know, here's the thing. All religions say this: I'm going to do good to get to God. Yeah. Christianity says this: God came to us. Yeah. And that's the difference. It's not us being good. It's faith in Christ alone that changes everything.
I got to tell you, man, the older I get and the more I'm aware of myself,
oh man,
I'm thankful for the grace of God.
That's it. That's the one word. It's grace. It really is. And so thank you for just allowing me to share, and hopefully, that made a thought for someone.
Listen, I never talk about it. And when we agreed to do this, it's been in the back of my head. And I even had like a little note that was like a little question mark. It was like,
should I do it or not?
And I was like, we're just going to talk about this because you're my friend, you're my brother. And if there's ever a person that I would want to talk about this on the podcast, it'll be you. So,
well, thank you. And Jerry, you'd asked me a question. It was through a text. You said, hey, how does it feel? You're an introverted person and you're going out and you're getting all this public attention. How does that feel for you? I made a decision a while back on that. I just said, heck with it. Whatever happens, happens. I'm just going for it because this is my message to people. And I think it's very, very helpful. And just so I can plug the book for a minute, Gospel of Fitness on Amazon.com, Steve McKinney. So
I will put links in the show notes. This is what it looks like.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And if people need to reach me, they can just go to fitnessandmore.net, and there's a free intro workout there. Just go through that, and I'll reach out back to them.
Hey, dude, I'm glad we did this. I'm glad we talked about it. I'm glad it's here and we're done. So, is there anything else you wanted to say before we wrap it up?
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. What a pleasure. What a joy. I had fun, and I love doing these. These are just fun to me. These are, I could do these 5 a day. I just love them. But it's just a blast. But it was great talking to you.
Awesome, Steve. Thanks so much, man. We'll talk later, okay?
All right. See you, bro.